Welcome to Unreal Labs. Today I'll be showing you how to install DHCP and perform some basic configuration. So DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and what it's used for, DHCP is a network management protocol used for IP networks, where the DHCP server dynamically assigns an IP address and other network configurations parameters to each device on the network so they can communicate with other IP networks or devices. So basically, if you had a home router, that's what your little home Wi-Fi router does. It has a DHCP server built in. But in more of a corporate network or a network that would have, a small business server or something like that, you can install DHCP, on the server. And that's what we're going to be doing today, not having the router do it, but we're going to have it from the server, which gives us a lot of advantages, as I'll have some more videos in this series getting deeper into DHCP. So we're just starting pretty basic. So we're going to get into how it works. So I got this little diagram here, and bear with me here. This is my first video on YouTube, so I'm a little off. But so we're going to start with this DHCP discover. So the DHCP client, the PC or Mac or iPad, is going to broadcast to DHCP discover message on the network, and that's the broadcast would be like 255, 255, 255, 255. So if we had Wireshark running, we'd actually see that. I'll do a demo of that later, in a different video. So this broadcast happens from the PC or client, and hopefully the DHCP server on the network picks this up. So at this point, the DHCP server does a DHCP offer back, which is an IP lease request. So the DHCP server at this point reserves an IP address in its scope and makes a lease offer back to the PC or the device. So it goes back this way. Now they're talking to each other. So these are still broadcasts. So at this point, if the PC or the device here, the DHCP client, accepts this, then it sends a request back and says, all right, that works for me. So I'm going to send a DHCP request back to the DHCP server to acknowledge that IP and to request it. At that point, if the DHCP server, because it's holding that IP and it gets this request, at this point it sends an acknowledgement that it received its request. So this is the four stages here, back to the DHCP client or the PC, saying, all right, here's the, excuse me, what am I trying to say? So it includes the lease duration and other configuration information to that client, and this finalizes the transaction here. So at this point, the PC has an IP address, subnet mask, gateway, hopefully, DNS server configurations, and then the lease time of how long it's going to actually be holding that IP, or is able to keep that IP without requesting a new one, or the same one if it's available. So let's just minimize this and let's go to the VMs. So I got two VMs right here. One will configure DHCP and the other one will just pretty much be using it as our client here. So, and currently right now the client has no IP or an auto-configured IP here, so it's not receiving anything. So we're going to be in Server Manager. We're going to go to Manage, Add Roles and Features, and we're going to start this wizard. I'll do a PowerShell video down the road on how to do this actually just through PowerShell, which to me is a heck of a lot better. But this is just the basic video, so, or basic topic here. So this is run through the wizard. So at this point we're going to so installation type, role-based, feature-based. Server selection, we're going to select server 1 because that's this server, and that's the IP currently set on this server. So we'll hit next. So we're good there. Looks like I have it already installed, which is good. So you would check this box and hit next, and then next again, and then you would click install, and that would finish that wizard there. So at this point, we should have this little exclamation box up here saying we need to complete the DHCP configuration. So we're going to click that hyperlink, and what we're doing now is we're actually making security groups inside of the Windows server. to authorize the service. So we're going to be creating these groups on the server right now. So we're going to commit those, and hopefully this will say done. It's pretty fast, and we'll hit close. And so at this point, the security groups have been made, and the DHCP service belongs to those. So now if we go to our tools menu, you'll see DHCP in there, and we have a basic non-configured DHCP server. So we have no scopes or anything in here. So now we're going to go and right click on this IP version 4, and we're going to do a new scope, and we're going to hit next, and I'm just going to name it Unreal Labs. And we're going to hit next again. And so now we're going to set the starting IP and the end IP, and then the subnet mask for this subnet. So previously, as you saw, the server sitting in 172.16.30, so its IP is 10. So I'm going to start my scope at 20, just to be a little safe, and then I'll end it out at just on a /24, so 253. So I'm going to move this to a 24. Now we could go, to a /23, and have more IPs. It's up to you, but this is just for a demo and pretty much a small network. So, but it still gives us, 233 devices that it could handle, which is quite a bit. So we'll hit next again. So if we wanted to add any exclusions or to the scope, so like I know a lot of guys will do this in the industry where they'll configure one all the way up to 254, which is fine. I just like to leave that 254 free and then some, room at the beginning. And now you could start adding exclusions here if you wanted. So you could add, 1 through 10, and then it would never hand those out. Personally, I don't really recommend doing that. Isn't the best way to do this. Really, I like to have a little headroom, on the beginning and the back end, just for some static assigned to devices if I need them, like printers and things like that. I might not want them getting DHCP. So we'll hit next, and then I'm just going to zero these out here. And hit next again. And so now we're at lease duration. So how, pretty much, to summarize this, is how long do we want the lease to be active? Or for the PC or the device to request another IP or the same IP. So personally, I'm just going to do a day. So we'll get into like how this really works. There's some, it will actually check in at about half its lease duration to see if that same IP is available. If it's not available, then we'll talk about that down the road here. But we'll just go 1 day, so 24 hours. And now we're moving on to options. So we're going to configure some, the default gateway, WINS, if you have that, which that's pretty old, NetBIOS to IP. But right now we're going to configure some options. We're going to choose next, and I'm going to type in my default gateway, just 1. Next, and so I'm going to configure my. You don't necessarily have to have this but personally I do like to configure my DNS local address or name, my domain name. So this will be what it's handed out. So any PC or iPad that gets an IP is going to have this added to it. So if it was host1, it'll be host1.unreallabs.local. And on the DHCP, on the DNS server that we're going to be configuring, I'm personally just going to use Google. Now, if this was an AD domain controller, I would, add its IP of 172.16.30.10, because I would want it looking locally at the internal DNS server. But I don't have one set up right now, so we're just going to use Google as the DNS server that's handed out. And we could add a secondary too if you wanted, so 8.8.4.4 if we. And I don't have this connected to the internet, so this might time out. We'll see. Or we could be sitting here forever, actually. Okay. So it didn't resolve it, that's fine. We'll still add it and hit next. So wins, I'm not going to configure wins, but same kind of thing. If it was, we could do like server 1 if you had one, and you could resolve it to the IP using DNS, or if you know the IP, you could configure it that way also. And we'll hit next again. And so now it's asking if we want to activate the scope. If we're happy with it, we can hit yes now, or we can, activate it later. So I'll hit yes because I want it active, and we'll hit finish. And so now we have a scope of 172.16.30, that's subnet/24, Unreal Labs. We have address pool of 20 through 253. We don't have any leases yet, so no requests have been submitted, and I haven't made any reservations, and we'll talk about this. This is where we'll go through this later in this video. So then scope options, that's what we set. So our router default gateway 172.16.30.1, our DNS servers of 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4, and then our local DNS name, which is unreallabs.local, or whatever you have. Could be Bob the Builder for all, whatever you have for your DNS name for your network. So then policies, we'll get into that. This is more of an advanced topic here, but we'll get into that later. And then I just wanted to show you some of the options that are in here you might see. So the server options below here, this is a global area where you could set server options. If you had multiple scopes, you could actually set some pretty cool features in here that all of them will have. Now, the scope options here have preference over the scope options here. So if you have, default gateway set up here, and you set a different one here, the one you set up on the scope will have precedence. So we also have filters. This is actually a really neat feature. This can allow all, and we can deny MAC addresses we can either allow them or we can deny them. So we'll get into that in a different video, but right now we'll just go through the really, really basic setup. So right now we have no leases, so I'm going to pop this other VM open, VM2 here, and I'm going to, you could either restart the box, or I'm just going to open up PowerShell and ipconfig renew. And this is going to start that process we talked about before. So this is starting, this is actually happening behind the scenes here. So and it's usually pretty fast. Hopefully. We'll see. Just make sure I'm using the right network adapter right now. Oh no. Alright, well I gotta fix something real quick. So that's why this is timing out. So let me go back here. I'm on the wrong network adapter here. I should have checked that before I started. So I'm going to shut down our DHCP server. I know this is not a VirtualBox demo, but I'm going to uncheck this, or enable it. I'm going to bridge it, and I'm going to go with that physical adapter. So now we're not adding anything in VirtualBox. Alright, we'll sign in. Yeah, we can be discovered, that's fine. Open up DHCP console again. And we might actually have a lease, but so we're back where we were. Alright, yeah, so as I was saying, it's pretty fast. So, and this should have actually got 20, but I had a different video I did, so it already had this saved. So it was going to request the same IP again if it had it, and that's part of this process we'll get into further detail with why that happens, but yeah, discoverable is fine. So we've got some options here. As you see, like there's the DNS suffix, Unreal Labs.local, the IP address that was assigned, 30.50, the subnet mask 255.255.0, so /24, default gateway of 172.16.30.1, and then I'm going to do an all here, and that should give us more detailed information. So at this point, we can actually see we set for a day, so Saturday, it's Saturday, August 1st, 2020, and the lease will expire tomorrow at 2 p.m. on the 2nd, so Sunday. So, and here's our DNS servers that were configured, and then here's the the DHCP server that assigned this configuration, which is pretty handy to know too if you have multiple DHCP servers, which we're going to do in a couple different videos. I'm going to do some more advanced features. As you can see, we can do super scopes, multicast scopes, which we'll be doing. We'll be configuring some failover, so if we have 2 DHCP servers. So we'll be doing some more advanced topics. This video is mainly, like, just to reiterate, just a basic install of DHCP, and if we do come back over here, that leases, so you should see, if we refresh, you'll see the leases that were handed out. So we've got a couple here of the devices that are on the network that have got IPs. So these are some other adapters on my virtual host, and this is that server 2. That's the VM there. So we've handed out 3. So let me just do one thing before I end this video. I think we're doing pretty good on time. I don't want to be too long. Is reservations. So let's just say that I wanted to keep server 2 always getting 30.50. So you can actually add it to a reservation, and that now has been converted. So now you'll see in the address leases, you'll see this reservation is now active. So if this Mac comes on the network and broadcasts out for an IP, the DHCP server is going to look through this list, and it's going to see that it has a reservation for this MAC address, which is server 2, and it's going to hand it back that 30.50. And if we look through reservations, we can actually see, there it is, the configuration options. And so this would be the first reservation we'd have. So I'm going to get rid of it because I don't really need it, but that's just the other feature. So when we were setting the scope up, guys, like I was saying, they'll set exclusions and then do static IP. So if you didn't want to do exclusions that way, in statics, you could assign the whole scope and then come in here and add a reservation. So if you had a printer that did get an IP, you could add a reservation for that printer or network device, and it will always, for the most part, come up. There's some caveats to that, but as long as the Mac doesn't change, it should pull the same IP. Anyways, thanks for joining me at Unreal Labs. We'll have we're just starting this channel. Please subscribe if you can. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. I know it's not perfect. I'm still, this is my first intro video, so this will probably be like a 4-part series. So yeah, tune in again. I appreciate your time. Thanks again.